What is the nature of suffering, and how might it flood the world? Upon an analysis placed within the book of Job, which a particular author, which I believe was A. Mitchell, that which published his analysis behind the book of Job, he places a statement regarding delusion being another definition for suffering. And so I began to dive into the word delusion a little bit in order to understand what might be the root cause behind what we would consider delusion, and how might that result in a flood. In the French pronunciation of the word flood, you might find the word deluge, which means to flood. Within delusion, you can imagine the essential meaning of the French translation for the same spell word you might invoke, you might say. Imagine now if you were to specifically share your memories, your pains, your suffering to an individual, or before a crowd, or before any present being. You might find that you essentially flood their emotions. An act of a delusion. Within said act of a delusion, you might find that we as humans have a competitive nature. You flood my emotions, I flood yours. And now we begin to see how delusion ultimately leads to suffering. Because in the end, in the competitive aspect of humans, you might find that humans will then compete against who has suffered more, flooding each other with delusion, which from these different pains and sufferings of each other's memories, you might say, within these particular memories, you might find in your own self, you then start to warp the stories that which you initially remember. You take on a different memory that which you initially remembered. In the understanding of memory, you might find that anytime you specifically visit or revisit a memory in time, you alter that memory. You perceive it differently. And from perceiving it differently, every time you revisit the past, in order to bring it up in conversation, you can actively find that you shift the story every single time. And every single time, once again, begins the flooding, the delusion. And in the competing of delusion, we then see the world flood itself in order to say, I have been hurt worse. In the acceptance of life, one might argue for the purpose behind life, which if life was easy, you would simply just not want to live it. What would be the point of proving an opposing force wrong? Being able to claim, I could survive that. Rather than taking on the victim mentality, you might take on a survivor type mentality, and from a survivor you might arise once again to the hero. These three particular mentalities once again reflect a pyramidical structure of different core belief systems and values that each individual will hold within themselves. Call it the warrior, the spirit, the survivor, the mind, the body, the victim. Within these different particular mentalities are once again a different dive within the number 3. In the number 3 you might find different personifications of the number 3. 3 kings, 3 dimensions, 3 minds. From each of these particular points, you might find that once again, You are essentially from a point of which particular kingdom you belong to. Within the physical, the body, we see people, individuals with a victim-like mentality. The more they are attached to the body, the more they take on a victim-like mentality. From the mentality, you might take on a survivor, once again, type mentality, which is a more advanced attachment to the mind. A martyr-like mentality. You survive that. But then you rise to the hero, the spirit, the great kingdom. Within each of these kingdoms, you might find, once again, infinite interdivisions of the same patterns of the initial pyramid, which each another pyramid of pattern. Within these particular energy systems, you might find that you can actively create infinite measures of time, generating and prophesizing your time. Alternately, you can degenerate your time the moment you essentially pull back into your memories. And the moment you pull back into your memories, you enter the world of delusion, because not only will you flood your own emotions, but you will flood the emotions of others. And the more we flood each other's emotions with each other's suffering, you might find that ultimately all humans are competing for who has suffered the most. If the competition regarding who has suffered the most is a key to entering heaven, then I would argue that that is a very false way of looking at things. So why are we competing in our suffering as humans? It is a victim mentality, an attachment to the body. So I invite you as an individual to change the story, if you wish. Change the story. You are bound by the time of the past, making you present. And from the present, it is entirely up to you how you move forward into the future. Thank you.